I'll call the meeting to order here at 8:06 a.m. We will look at the agenda. I thought we'd start first with the fees discussion since we need to vote on that. And that affects kind of the overall budget. And then we jump into the review of kind of some of the slides of the presentation. I can share some of the questions that we've gotten from the warrant committee, which hopefully we're, I think, already addressing some of those in the slides and can talk about how we can address some other ones in the slides. All right, so I will share my screen to share the fee memo. Katie, I think it might be helpful if just as a starting place, you want to just provide kind of high level, and then also I think you pretty much captured in the memo, but just say like what is the department's recommendation related to the at least the like 75,000.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so there are recommendations for modifications for 3 of the fees. It includes the transportation fee. So that is the fee that we charge our families. It's a per student fee, and there is a family cap. And that is the fee that we charge the riders that were not legally obligated to transport to school. So the state mandates that we transport students in grades K through 6 that live 2 miles or further from their house to the school. And so the fee that we're charging is for the students that are in grade 7 through 12 or live within the 2 miles. So again, the current fee being $325, family cap of $650. There is a $50 late fee that is charged per family if a student registers after the deadline. That was just instituted last year. And so we also kind of, in addition to the fee, we have put a recommendation of adding back 1 bus into the operating budget for fiscal year 27. And so a piece of when we were looking at the fees and how much to charge also incorporated the fact that we would have additional ridership that we could potentially offer a spot to because we would be adding that bus back. And so that was part of the analysis, knowing that for that bus, it could potentially only be like an additional 40 students that would be fee-based. And so if you look at the grid, it just shows the current number of students that had paid, and this is all data that are for the 25-26 school year, the current price that we're targeting and the revenue that we received for those students paying that fee. And then you can just see each tier of increasing it by $25, making the assumption that we will increase capacity by 50 students, and that's 50 fee-based riders. And if you increase the price by $25 per student, which would also increase the family cap, and you can see the additional revenue that we would be making kind of at each level. The recommendation, or what we built into the budget as increased revenue was $75,000 total.
Yeah.
And so for transportation, that would be just increasing it by $25. And that's with that additional bus. The second fee is the student activity fee for the high school. And so we actually reviewed this last year and discussed it last year as well, but we wanted to bring it up again. The current fee for high school student activities is $25 a club with a $50 per student maximum. And then once the students hit that maximum, they can participate in as many clubs as they want. So they could participate in 10 clubs and it would be $50. The current revenue received is about $22,000. The impact of increasing the cost per club for the high school is shown in that grid. And again, we built in 75,000 overall as a fee increase into the budget. So it's going to be a combination of the three increases. So it's the 40,000 from transportation, 17,000 from student activities. So that would be increasing
By 25.
what we're using by the 17,000. So I just, one note is initially in the budget, we had said that we were going to use $7,500 from the revenue received to offset the expenses in the budget. But you can see that the current revenue received is $22,000. And so there's actually more revenue that we're bringing in that we could use to offset the budget at the current fee. Does that make sense? So right now, we're saying for next year that we were only going to use $7,500 of the revenue received to offset the expenses in the operating budget. And the expenses that we would offset is that money essentially is going to pay for the stipends for the advisors that are helping out with the club. And then as we started to look at the data this year, the high school has done a really nice job at making sure, coming up with a system to track the fees and to track the collections. So we've increased the revenue that we received kind of above and beyond what we've received historically for student activities. So instead of just thinking that we were going to get $7,500 in revenue, we've actually got $22,000 in revenue. So that is the money that we could use as an offset in the operating budget without even having to touch the fees, just because that is what is coming into it, the account. That's the revenue that we're receiving. So that's a pretty significant change. If we did want to increase the clubs, just even by $5, $10, $15 per club. And so that would also increase that overall cap for each one of the students. It would bring in some additional revenue that we could use to kind of offset the expenses. And we were saying in total, we built in $17,000 into the budget. So I think my recommendation would be that we could either increase by $5 a club or $10 a club, and we would still have enough revenue to be able to meet the revenue received that we had built into the budget. And the other thing I want to note too is right now we charge a different amount for the middle school than we do for the high school. And I think by increasing the high school, that's kind of just an effort to get us to the point where they're and then the last one is building use. So building use is the fee that we're charging individuals to use the schools kind of outside of school hours. That's the fields, the auditorium, some instances the cafeteria. It applies to all of the schools. And we charge a different rate for nonprofits than we do for individual, like for-profit organizations. The fee hasn't increased I think the last increase for some of these fees were 10, 15 years ago. So then it's just one of those areas. This is just one of those areas where we said, okay, we haven't changed the fees in a number of years. The facilities are used, our facilities are running, they don't run 7 to 3 Monday through Friday. They are pretty much like 24/7, 365 operations. And so we just thought it was appropriate to increase those fees. So the fee proposal is just a 10% overall increase.
I will say there's just a slight error on the year change because we changed last year, um, the Brooks Field, and the auditorium rentals, which you can, I think, see in that by years. I think it jumped from 24 to 25.
Oh,
So I think this last year increase just for those is wrong because
oh, we should, okay, so that was before. Huh, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I will update that. So that was in fiscal year 24, that was.
in fiscal year 24,
Okay.
for the
Okay,
increase
great.
just a couple of these, but not all. Questions folks have? Yes, Nathan.
Thanks, Mark. Thank you, Katie, for walking through. Sorry, should I hold questions? I didn't know, Katie, if you were wrapped up walking through this.
No, I'm pretty much done.
Yes, questions.
Anything.
Okay. All right, great. This is helpful. I think I had a couple of things. I think I'm not sure, maybe overall, or at least within these three fee areas, kind of what our philosophy is around fees, and how we pair those to actual costs. So transportation seems like maybe the easiest one, where we have a legal mandate to provide transportation. The costs of the transportation will probably never match what we take in fees overall. That seems pretty straightforward in terms of the structural gap that creates. On student fees, on activity fees, if I heard you right, I think I heard that we are taking in more fees than it costs to run the club.
No, we're taking in, so the revenue is exceeding what our original projection is.
Okay.
So our original projection of what we would be able to utilize from revenue received was $7,500. And we're actually bringing in $22,000. But the expense associated with student activities is $300,000 a year. So
Okay.
this is just a really small fraction
Got
of the overall expense to run the clubs.
Got it. That makes much more sense. Okay, great. And then on building use, I have two questions here. Do we know what the fully loaded costs are for, I assume these are single use fees. So someone rents the field house, and it's going to cost them next year for one time $275. Do we know what the fully loaded cost is of that rental for the school district? And then I'll just ask my second question, or just an observation, which is, and I guess this gets to the philosophy, which is, do we view our fee structure as something that we sort of try to keep as low as humanly possible and adjust only when necessary? Or do we view it as an offset that needs to keep pace with costs? And, like the field house was the fee was last updated 12 years ago. If we just every year slightly increase the fee, that would probably bring us in FY27 to something like $350 per use. So really different than where we're at now. So just wondering if we have an opinion on that collectively.
I can share my opinion. Again, I think to your point, transportation is a harder one because we have a mandated portion of it, we have an optional portion of it, and the mandated portion of it by itself creates opportunity for the optional portion of it. So it wouldn't make sense to just stop offering it because we have the seats on the bus. So I don't think there's a clear line of saying, hey, we want to charge exactly this because it's exactly what it cost us for the optional portion of transportation, because those two things are so linked. I think generally my thought would be that, to your kind of two scenarios, that we try and have this increase in budget pressure times, that we have fees increase at rates that are associated with the increased costs. So for example, transportation costs next year are going up 8% for the contract for these kinds of services. If we are in better situations, I think John's talked about this before, we might not need to increase those fees and put that on the backs of families. Because I do think some of this is like, what is the obligation for us as a town collectively versus what is the obligation of the individual family member? And those are like larger societal questions. And from my perspective, there's more of like what we owe our kids and families as a community, versus like what we should expect them to just kind of take on. And so I'm more on that we should offer this to everybody for as low cost as possible. Again, similar to the activities and fees, I think that same kind of idea of only increasing it when there are financial pressures to do so, to try and increase pace with what the increases are. For building use, I think of this as different in that I think we need to keep pace with cost, but more than that, it's not just the cost of how much it is to use the building for that window of time during the day, right? The custodial cost, the cleaning costs after the fact, that just utilities are turning on lights. It's also how are we building up revenue systems that allow us to have accounts that can help with the maintenance and rehabilitation of these spaces, like replacing the field lights at the Brooks. Like if we are renting it out for use of the fields, we should be generating some revenue, I think, within those users, to then have a pile of money at the end of the lifespan of the field to help replace it, if not fully replace it, at least offset that somewhat. That could be different than how the town thinks about this as a whole, and maybe that requires some coordination with the consolidated facilities and talking to Tom, and that would be something I'd be interested in as it relates to kind of our discussion of what is our revolving account policy specifically for building use. But like what is the number we need to be generating above and beyond just paying off custodians and paying off for kind of utility costs for the schools, offsetting utility costs for the schools. That allows us to generate some revenue to again have these larger capital improvements, so we're not fully reliant on or putting all the pressure on the town capital revenue streams, which we know are limited and we're not able to get, as we saw kind of this year with the capital requests of the field lights, which weren't able to be funded. So that's my long answer.
No, I was in a similar camp, especially with the building use. I mean, we were just at facilities meeting yesterday, and just thinking about a lot of the carryover needs year to year, like the capital improvements, things around the book field, things on the track, like all of those things. And so if there are ways to to generate some revenue that can help offset or help support some of the maintenance and then in some cases the improvements that need to be made because of the use, I think that piece would be important. So that's I'm in agreement on the use piece.
The only other thing I'll say to that is I don't know if a 10% increase gets us to that goal. I think there's two things in my mind. Is the short-term answer of what are we doing to address the FY27 budget and present something to the full school committee where we have this kind of placeholder number within the budget plan of the 75,000, and how do we, between these three streams, kind of fix that, or tell them we need to reduce that, right? That's obviously something we could do as well. But then I do think there's a broader discussion of taking these fees back and talking to Tom, talking to Katie and John about, what would a longer term kind of building use revolving account policy look like, and what would be the fees necessary to start building up that account, because we know that account was also one that was depleted in FY24. it's not in a place that could accomplish the goals that, we were just talking about. What are your thoughts, Nathan?
So yeah, all that makes sense. So it sounds like the way to think about this today is the goal of the fee. I mean, and I know this, so I'm just saying it out loud. The goal of the fee increases today is to help close the budget gap, not to create the best fees. Like, just if we think about the facilities use, not to create the fee structure that is ideally matched to the cost of the facilities rentals. So that's fine. And it would be good to, it'd be good, as you said, Mark, to work on that in the future. And the one thing I might say, just as a little bit of a rebuttal to something you said, is I agree with you in principle that keeping fees low and only raising them when we have to is good. But my guess would be, I don't have any evidence for this, but my guess would be that when we are in a budget crunch as a district and are backed into a corner and have to raise fees, that is probably also happening at the same time that families are more likely to be in a budget crunch and are looking at increased costs. And so I would be comfortable with regularly raising fees, even if it's small. Like, we don't have to say 3 or 5% every year. We could say 1% or something. But so that when in years when we are in a budget crunch, there's not such an economic shock to families, especially families at the lower end of the earnings spectrum. It's just a proportionally higher, it's proportionally greater share of their income.
I think that's a fine point. I think some of the things we've talked about in prior years with fees is also how do you, like we talked about, like, hey, we should create kind of some ideal fee pattern of, we're going to look at these types of fees in this cycle, and then the next year this type of fee, and then just have like a 3 or 4 year cycle of that every so often. Because as you see, some fees haven't been changed in a decade, more than a decade, and so that does feel like we are just kind of digging ourselves a hole, and then having to really raise it. So I don't even know if we need to raise them every single year at a smaller increment, but even if we just raise them at an increment every 2 or 3 years, because we were just talking about, families you use before and after school, who have kids in sports, right, who have kids in the middle school and clubs, like, increasing all those fees simultaneously also feels like a lot and a big impact on families versus kind of trying to figure out how you have pockets. But it's definitely not something I think we have solved and fully hit on over the last 2 years.
I think my other question would be, as a follow-up, in the same way that we were talking about, say, for example, there's a policy that we have around, we were talking about like circuit breaker, that we would carry X% year to year.
Yeah.
Do we have a policy or a philosophy, or however, a policy that the fees will account for X% of the cost of running programs? Mm-hmm. And so otherwise it feels a little arbitrary. Yeah. And so if we're saying, so to that point, like, if the cost of running a program doesn't increase every year, then why would we increase the fee every year? Versus if the stipend increases, right? Or there's something like that, then it's tied to what the stipend is, and then we know that it's more expensive to run that program. Because to your point, I think part of the thing about school is, like, it's the way we're getting, for some kids, coming because they get to play lacrosse is what's getting through the door. And it's the life, I was thinking about, like, the life of the school. That's the life of the school. So if there are things that we can do to just recognize that that's a benefit of going to school, and we're not trying to, obviously we can't fully cover the cost, and that wouldn't be the goal. But I think to have a goal of, okay, we will look to cover 3%, whatever it is, and have that number, then it's tied to an increase and a why. And I think then it's easier for people to understand the increase, as opposed to just randomly every couple of years or whatever. So, and I think similarly, I would say similarly with the bus, what is our goal? Like recognizing, I think it would be, cost prohibitive. I mean, people have, it's just, if you're old like me, we didn't have to pay for the bus to get to school, so it was from of course you get a free bus.
Right.
And so I recognize times are different, but again, is there, if we were offering it, if we're adding a bus, then what's the portion of that cost that our goal is to cover? So I just think as long as we have numbers in, then every year it doesn't become a policy, that it doesn't become a question of like, feels like this,
Right.
Yeah.
It would make the process more straightforward if there was a policy that was driving the decision making. So I think when I think about the fees, it's important to note that we almost have two different categories. When we look at the revolving funds and some of the programs that we're charging fees for, we have programs that the intent is for them to be self-sustaining. And so as much as we may not want to increase the fee that we're charging, we may have to because the costs are increasing at a level where you have to increase the fees to have that program remain self-sustaining. And so an example of that would be community schools when we talk about that fee increase. And then there's that other portion of fees where we're charging the fee and potentially increasing the fee, but it's only offsetting a portion of what the overall expense is. And the intent of charging the fee and increasing the fee is just to alleviate some of the pressure of the expense increase that we're seeing in the operating budget. I just wanted to mention, we talked last year a lot about the fees as well. And it was also difficult because we were doing so at the same time that the community was being asked to support an override or to consider an override. And so we tried to be, I think from my perspective, trying to just be mindful of the fact that there were going to be impact to a household in kind of a variety of different ways. And so last year we increased athletics, we increased summer enrichment, we increased a number, and we instituted that late fee for transportation. A part of that process was doing an analysis of comp districts. And so there is some information on what other communities close to us are charging. So that's Nathan, to your question, that's kind of a part of when we're looking at what fee we're charging. We do look at comp districts in order to say like, we don't want to be charging the most, but we also don't want to be charging the least amount. We're trying to make sure that it's somewhere kind of that's reasonable and makes sense for this district. So there is information on that. I can reshare that. And that again is specific to transportation. For community use, there is a school committee policy that is just around community use of school facilities. And it says that it's the school committee's desire that maximum use of school property be enjoyed by the townspeople. And so whenever I've thought of school facilities and facilities rentals, I don't know that the intent is to charge the user kind of for the total cost of using the facility, or it's more of we'll take some of that revenue and just offset a portion of the cost. Because it is in some instances we've had, and not specific to being here, but some a basketball program may come in and break a backboard and it costs us $10,000 and we're only charging $200 to use the facility. So there are, definitely variations in how much that's actually costing us. And I wouldn't be able to kind of provide a number on how much that expense is to the budget, how much it would cost us to like have a community come in and use a certain facility. I haven't done the analysis on that. And then there are I don't know that MASC provides a sample policy on revolving accounts, but there is a school committee policy on student fees, fines, and charges. So that may be an appropriate place if there is, a consistent policy to put into place for the future, that could be an amendment to an existing policy that then could just be used when we update the fees going forward.
Yeah, I think this goes hand in hand a bit with our revolving accounts.
Yeah,
I think again, so
it does.
fees generate the revenue that goes into the revolving accounts, and so what is the balance we want to have in the revolving accounts? How do these, connect to that bit too?
Yeah.
And we always take into account if a family has an inability to pay, that is always taken into account. We never want to make the fees prevent a student from being able to participate. So I think that's a really important part of it.
So I want to be mindful of time because we want to try and talk about the slides. In terms of the recommendations of the fees. So just to try and restate it in terms of what the department's recommendation is in order to get that 75,000, it's a $25 increase to transportation fees. It's about a $5 increase to club fees because we'll also can increase revenue usage, especially revenue usage. I don't know if you're, yeah, is that right?
Mhm.
And then a 10% increase for all building fees. Or, yeah. Anybody have questions, concerns about that recommendation?
No, thanks for the discussion. I'm happy to support this.
I was wondering, like, just only thing in my mind, just to share, and I'm not sure what exactly what's on it, is $25 increase on the 325 is obviously less than 10%. It's the lowest percentage increase kind of the fees we are discussing. While at the same time, I know we are increasing the bus usage, and even beyond that, we are increasing the cost of transportation for the contract is an 8% increase.
Correct.
Not just next year, but also the following year. And then I think a 10% increase if we stay with the same company the following year after that. So it's kind of and transportation costs are increasing more significantly. So I need to generate all of this though.
Are you
Yes.
saying that, do we look at a higher increase for transportation?
I guess maybe what I'm saying is not increasing club fees, and then increase transportation fees by 10%, like 30, maybe it's $35 to get a round number there. That's 360.
Mhm.
So that'd be just over the 10%, but that generates more money than I think we initially need, and or more than the 75,000, I should say. So I don't know if that is just kind of muddling things up by making that suggestion. That's a piece that just sits in my head of, again, the percentage increases lower than the rest and lower than what the actual cost of transportation is going up next year.
What was the fee increase on buses last year?
We didn't increase fees for buses. We implemented the $25 late charge,
Yeah.
but we didn't increase the baseline fee.
We just terms, yes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, check too.
The last time we increased transportation was FY23. We increased them by $50 and $100. $50 per student, $100 family max.
And so, Mark, you're suggesting modestly increase the fee a little bit further and eliminate the fee increase on clubs.
Yeah, I mean, given we already also, drastically increase the revenue in a given year. Obviously, again, that is not associated with the actual cost of running the program, but we've already the families participating in clubs, you would say, increase their contribution by $15,000, which is 150% increase, 200% increase. In a given year, just based on the collections, again, the fees didn't go up, so maybe that's some poor math I'm doing there. But yes, I'm sorry, I'm rambling a little bit. I think that would be my thought, is increasing the transportation fee by $35, 10%, or we could even say $30, make it $355. Just increase it by a little bit more, and then that would allow us to not have to increase club fees.
I like that idea. It's creative. Is there anything, it's kind of a funny question. Is there anything that we would expect to be different between the students who take buses and the students who participate in clubs? And I'm trying to understand if this fee increase disproportionately hits a different subset of the student body. Seems like maybe not, but I just don't know.
Well, it would be more middle school and high school kids.
Mm-hmm.
There are elementary school kids who pay the ride.
Correct.
The breakdown, I don't know if you know that off the top of your head.
I don't know off the top of my head.
Yeah, I mean, the club fees are only associated with the high school, so they don't affect any middle school or elementary kids, to your point. The transportation fee, I won't say most, but obviously we are mandated to drive kids K through 6 who live within a certain mileage away from schools. So it would be anybody who's under that threshold in K through 6, and then any 7th through 12th grader who utilizes the bus, which there are. So.
Okay, so if anything, my potential worry, it goes in the opposite. I mean, there's no way to know this probably, but it potentially spreads out fees more evenly across the district rather than concentrating them in sort of disproportionately in one group.
Yeah, the 5,000 revenue, and my rough math is that increasing this by an additional $5 generates about $7,800 of revenue. I just took this number divided by 25.
Yeah.
Multiply that by 5. So
okay.
So that $5 extra would cover for this. And yes, this group that's covering the $5,000 is a smaller number of students than this group, and it's a more concentrated group of students given they're all high schoolers. This group. Yeah.
I was trying to pull it up again. I think my question about the transportation is, and I'm not. So I feel like there are more kind of factors going into this one too. So we're increasing ridership, because we're increasing a bus, but we are also in the second year, we'll be in the third year. Second year of a new contract, which it's not, they're not small increases.
Correct.
With that.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess my question would be, and looking at some of the comparable districts, we are still below. I mean, I think some of them, they were in that 800 to 850 family cap. And we're still significantly below that, some of them. So, I would be, I know this isn't like a menu where we're picking and choosing, but I do sort of feel like, for me, the clubs and fees, if they didn't have to go up, and the club fees didn't have to go up, recognizing that, kind of where we are with revenue, transportation is always a big cost, and we've seen that be an impact, and I almost wonder if you go to the increase of the $50.
Mhm.
Because I worry what it's gonna look like next year. That's still a $750 cap per family.
Another piece of it too for transportation, it's not as significant as the cost per bus, but we're also charged a fuel surcharge. And that is based off of, there's a calculation that's written into the contract that the bus company does. And then they pass the cost on to the school district for the fuel. And I think just looking at the market, kind of looking at what's happening, I can't imagine that those fees will be decreasing. So that's another piece to kind of consider, is the increase to that fuel surcharge as well. And so I just want to mention that too, if that kind of helps with some of the context around transportation.
Yeah, it's a good
Yeah.
point, Katie.
Yeah, I mean, I think we might have to have a conversation about increasing fees again next year.
Yes.
Just because of, again, that, and also the thing I keep referencing, the like 8%, but just ongoing percent increase that, maintaining these things is gonna, the pressures that we'll put on our budget. Yeah, I worry a bit about just, again, the scale of increases to anybody. And so I think I thought of like the $35. Let's try to go a bit beyond this, but maybe kind of meet in the middle. So all the way up. Yeah, I don't know. So are you proposing a $50 increase? Okay. Nathan, what are your thoughts on that?
But with no student,
Increase.
no increase to student activity fees.
So your proposal is $50 increase to transportation, no increase to club fees, and the recommended 10% increase to building use. Okay, can I take that as a motion? Just for the purpose of discussion, I will second that motion, and we can discuss. Nathan, any further thoughts, questions on that pushback? I'm not trying to rush the process here, but.
No. So Mark, your initial proposal was to move it to more like a $30 increase. Now we're talking about potential $50 increase.
Yeah, my initial proposal was $30 or $35 again, around that kind of 10% mark, 8 to 10% mark.
Does that generate too much? Does that generate more fee revenue than KDU anticipated in the budget? Or are you sort of saying, okay, it'll generate a little bit more revenue than we expected, but it will help offset the fuel surcharge?
Correct, yes.
It would be good I think that's smart. I've seen estimates of fuel increases over the course of the next 12 months looking like 30% increases for current fuel costs. So that's probably a knowable estimate that might be good to bring to school committee, just depending on what the fuel surcharge starting point is. Yeah. I guess I'm comfortable with it. Yeah. It's a big jump.
Yeah, I agree. Can I make a friendly amendment and just say 40? Like trying to bring it down a little bit, because again, I think that generates more than what the 75,000 that then provides us a little buffer for the fuel surcharge. That is a bit unknown. But it's not trying to go quite so high. And that then keeps it under, this 365 is whatever. Would you be open to that 40? Would you be open to that, Nathan?
Yeah, I think so.
So the increases we're proposing is $40 for transportation, no dollars for student fees, and 10% on all building use fees. Is this, I'm sorry, just one thing I should make clear. The 10% is just for the other. It's not for the, because we have the town and nonprofit rate, we have the Parks and Rec rate, and then we have the other rate.
Correct.
So this is just the other rate.
Correct. Mhm. And that other category tends to be the largest. I know the fees are higher, but that tends to be our largest group for like the revenue generation.
Really?
Mhm.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to make that clear.
Mhm.
All right. Well, we have a motion, we have a second. Any further discussion on this recommendation to school committee? All right. Then Nathan?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. All right. We will share that with school committee tonight. Thank you for the discussion.
Everyone.
I do think Nathan's pointing out if there's any data around the fuel surcharge for
Sure.
what we think that's for this year and what would this look like, that would
Yeah,
also
absolutely.
frame that, the additional revenue discussion. All right. Warren committee budget presentation.
Do we have
Sorry.
to vote on
Community
community
schools.
schools?
Oh, you're right, because we did not actually vote on. So it's making a sign here also. Sorry about this. All right, I will make a motion to approve the FY27 fee increases presented last week by Milton for the Milton Community Schools. Any further discussion, questions on that discussion from last week?
No.
Right. Then we will go to a vote. Nathan?
Yes.
Amanda?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. All right.
9:20.
Yeah, 9:20. All right. Amanda has a hard stop here at around 9:15, 9:20. So we're gonna try and move through these slides. Shared them in advance. Obviously, we cannot unfortunately work on them simultaneously. Some open meeting law stuff. But we'll try and go through them, and then I think what you can do is you can send me your notes offline, or send Katie your notes offline. We can try and do that. Jeez. Sorry, I don't know what logged me out in the meetings.
Sorry, Mark, are you saying we can't work on them together right now?
No, we can work on them right now because we're in a
Okay.
public meeting. Like,
Yeah,
it's
right.
fortunate that we're somewhat already
Got
hindered
it.
on. No fault of anybody's, but all right. So sorry for the technological trouble. Let's try to do a lot here. Okay, here is the agenda. Generally, I shared this agenda with the warrant committee chair, just generally trying to make sure we were based on some of the feedback y'all had on that we are aligned on what we were trying to accomplish here. There, obviously, I think again, it was Nathan, your point where I was like, we should just take John's prior presentation to the school committee. I think Jay was in agreement with your point that that's not really there. The audiences there are quite different. I think what we were trying to do, walking through families through kind of conversations around the position cuts, is not actually kind of the purview of the warrant committee, and that we decide positions, but rather that like how are we having a sustainable budget? What are the budget increases? What are some of the cost drivers, broadly speaking, those types of things. So that was like a general conversation we had, and so that's framed some of this budget agenda. Katie also had the good idea of trying to start the conversation by pulling in some of the slides from the presentation we did the warrant committee back in the fall, and that presentation is also in the folder for today. So that this is some of that work.
Mhm.
And so we walk through the timelines. I also have the timelines, I think, later on.
Mhm. Yep.
Yeah, these were from John's thing, so I think we could figure out how to maybe consolidate some of this. I think this slide is a good one to kind of remind them of what best budgeting practices are that we are trying to follow. I think the philosophy and the priority statements, that is something also that kind of down here in our budget philosophy. So bring that, Katie, bring that up and talk about those philosophies, the roles and responsibilities, just the different roles of the committee versus the department that we presented previously.
1 second.
Yeah,
So
please.
back to the next,
Roles
the roles and responsibilities.
Oh, yes. So,
I feel like there's one piece that maybe is helpful around policy, sort of, because it I know one of there had been a question around policy. Okay, you did it. Never mind. I missed the policy word. Yep.
Because it's not bold. I wonder if it's
Can you
more
bold that?
important
Yeah.
to bold that.
Yes. I think it's important.
Yeah.
Because we do set the policy around this. Is the role of the school and the superintendent.
Great. So the components of the operating budget, which we'll get to a little bit later on, to the cost drivers. Quick overview of education funding. There's a good slide here, it looks like.
The one thing I was wondering about with this one, and it might just be a voiceover, where I thought it was really helpful last meeting when John talked about when those funds could be used. Like, so some have to be used within the fiscal year, some can be carried. Like, I think having an understanding of why there's flexibility within them, or when the funds have to be expended might be just useful to know. Because then it does talk to like why it's important to put them if it's in in one place versus another. So I think that I felt like that piece was important when talking about circuit breaker as well.
So funding sources to support the schools come from multiple sources at varying time.
Right.
Or like
Or to be
with varying time.
varying time periods. Is it maybe for utilization? Or for expenditure or something? Because I think it's that, like, what can you hold, what can you carry?
Yes.
Is a piece.
Yes.
It's great. I think we can talk about the link of the presentation here too. But because I tried to pull some of the slides here on the. Yeah, so we then, I think to your point, come back here when we try and talk about circuit breaker, which we anticipate being a point of conversation of greatest flexibility for this time. So we can.
Yeah.
I think this
So that just really goes through, if that would be like if that's more of an appendix, this is an appendix item versus a.
Yeah, I think that's what we need to talk about. Okay. Everybody generally agree with that kind of as a starting place. And again, I think we have some of the stuff here within the timeline rationales. These are just the 3 slides there that we can just kind of consolidate those with these at the top. So we can apologize to the warrant committee for the timeline being all messed up. But there we're at. Then we had a section on highlights past achievements of the past year, just if there's something we want to do to kind of acknowledge there's a lot of work that goes into the schools that the schools do. And so I think just there's no way we're gonna be able to hit on all of it, but just are there things we want to kind of share and be able to talk about with them positives of the school. And I think if we also end up having a presentation for town meeting. It's also something that
Mhm.
we started to put together.
Mhm.
It's to like share to
Yeah.
celebrate our kids and staff and all the awesome things they do. So,
Mark,
So-
I just
Yeah,
want to second that. I think it's so great to include this both for warrant committee and thinking about town meeting, and just it takes our budget out of abstraction, right? Like this money pays for stuff, learning, activities, experience, joy, all of that. So I think it's really great to highlight where this goes both, and we should include some photos if we can as well.
Should we start with that? Is that something that,
I think that's a good idea.
yeah, I think in the original
yeah, and then. it-
agenda, I said highlights and then, and then moved kind of the timeline goals,
Okay,
priorities. So I think what we could,
just start.
maybe move this down here and
Yeah.
include, say like, hey, we're excited, we've done so much this year. Let's start with this and then say, all right, now let's recap. Here's kind of what we discussed with y'all budget wise and fall. Well,
Cause I think I mean, every meeting, I mean, from what I do, we start with the student. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, just to ground, like, this is what we're talking about, the
Mhm.
kids, their achievements.
I wish that we could have the student reps come and talk about the highlights and achievements. I
Yeah.
think the best part of sometimes of the school committee meetings is listening to the students and what they find joy in.
It's not a conversation.
And then, well, I do enjoy that as well, but I do think that the students, just hearing from them and their voice and their perspective is, it's pretty awesome. So
Yeah.
maybe just,
we get Stephanie O'Keefe to produce 5-minute video here by
yeah,
Tuesday.
or even for town meeting, just saying like, you know, look around, like when you're at town meeting, it's a auditorium full of adults and it's a lot different when it's an auditorium full of high school students,
Yeah.
so.
All right, great. Keeping it moving. So again, this part will consolidate, but generally, again, timeline and priority philosophy. We want to make sure we start with that framing. So then it's the
Yeah.
kind of discussion of the allocation that we've received from the town. And then kind of the less than level service that this is a cut budget because we're going to be talking about something which will be cut 3.76%. This is I think if not all, mostly a slide taken kind of from John's prior slides. I left in this piece because I think it's just important to note and to make sure is on the warrant committee's radar. This is a concern from us from a long-term sustainability perspective, given that they are long-term financial stewards. And then trying to put, as we've done in the past, this year's increase in context with what the town has done.
This is the slide, I feel like, I don't know that we need the slide. If it's is it the one where we said that this is like the fifth?
This is the fifth lowest increase.
Because I just feel like at that point it does. I don't know that that means a lot.
I think what I'm trying to do is, I think anytime we go in front of the warrant committee, there are voices around questioning what is the school's increase, the school's increases. It's too high that, we've gotten questions of like, if the school increase is above inflation, why? Like, why would it possibly be above inflation? Even 3.76% is above inflation.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's certainly above like the Prop 2.5. And so why is the department possibly increasing that much? So I think my point of adding this is just the context of what a 3.76% increase means. That was also part of the context when we were saying, 5.2% increase budget for level service, trying to put that into context as well. That's actually not an outlier of what the town has done for the schools.
Mhm.
All of this is really in line, and the 3.76 is actually on the lower end. It's the bottom third of like what we've done in the last 2 years.
Mark, a comment. Oh, sorry, go
Yeah.
ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh, no, I was wrapping up. Yeah.
Just, I don't know if this, maybe having a slide like this would be a little pedantic, so we can not, but I'll just raise it. I think there is you hear people reasonably ask, Amanda, or you or Amanda just talked about it in the context of the warrant committee, like, why are costs outpacing inflation? And if we were, if a school department was purchasing a market basket of goods, we would expect it to peg to inflation, right? Like eggs and cars. But we buy some of the most expensive things you can possibly buy. Um, and I wonder if it would just be, and I don't know if it's here in the slides, but just to highlight the key cost drivers and how they are different than the typical drivers of inflation. Just to, and those are obviously special education costs, transportation costs, fuel costs, and a couple of other things. It might be worth just level setting around that.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I think we have down here kind of a section trying to highlight on cost drivers, and I think we can talk about it there.
Okay, all right.
It's a question of, again, the inflation question is, and that residential homeowner inflation is not the same as kind of state government contract inflation and things like that being another potential point that we might want to add a slide on or get into. I'm for the sake of like the length of this, I'm not opposed to potentially just moving this into the appendix and trying to move through this a little bit more quickly. And then if folks say 3.76 is high, we can pull this up within the appendix to say it's not high. This is kind of where it is.
Right.
So I'll make a note that might move it, because I do think we're going to need to cut down some of these slides. Anything. So I think this one we could maybe delete. And delete. All right, MPS cost drivers. So this is where we talk about salaries. Overall salary line is increasing by 3.72%. It's reduced due to position cuts. I think that's important to say, because if we were level service funded, this would not be it. So I tried to put that in there just because I want to make sure we're building context for any future budget asks. And then Katie had this nice slide on the breakdown. This is from the from that budget workbook that has been shared with the warrant committee. So hopefully they've looked at it, and this isn't different, but sharing that pie chart with kind of what the breakdown is. The first three being kind of salaries, the next three being operating costs. For that context, where are the drivers? What are the pieces of the budget? It's the exact same. And then trying to get a bit more into, we've had the questions from, it's come up kind of consistently, at least one warrant committee member on the teacher salaries, and just why are they going up higher than 2.5%? And so trying to walk through what that means. This is the place where I'm not 100% sure if we want to say this as an appendix or not, but
so I changed the slide. I think I actually moved your original down further into the appendix just to almost like simplify it. And I used historical data just because I think we just need to be careful talking about it because we're in a negotiation year. And so we can, but the original is still here. So if you'd rather use the original, but this is
the one for that.
Yeah, this is the one I put in. It's just an example of a new teacher starting. You would start, the new teacher starting at step 1 and then moving to step 2. And it's not just the cost of living increase of whatever percentage. It's actually the cost of the step and the COLA, which is in this example, which happened in 22 and 23 is 8.132%.
So, yeah, I don't disagree with this. I think put the context in, maybe say this before I put it on the screen, but I took the current year's table and then again, we are negotiating with the union, so there's nothing set for next year.
Yeah.
I think I was trying to use the current one because obviously that is most connected to our budget for next year, but I totally hear you, Katie, and so, maybe that is good context as essentially trying to show just this is what the table looks like, and this is kind of what happens. And yes, similar, like just used a couple different examples of fourth year person, what is there? I made some assumptions with the COLA adjustment. I put in 2.5% because that is kind of inflation adjustment that, again, has been referenced previously by a member of the warrant committee. And obviously that's linked to about 2.5%, so that it's not connected at all with any financial discussion. So I don't know if it also, I was thinking like maybe makes sense to pull a teacher contract outside of Milton, like as an example, to again, not to Katie's point, not kind of muddle it with the negotiations and the contracts. So there's like two different examples of you're just moving down moving down the steps and then moving down the step and moving over a lane. What is the impact? And what is the impact even if there's no COLA? So then another one I did was let's try to do like what is the percent increase at each step. I don't know if this is too much, but like mostly trying to get to this point. Like, there's never a world in which we would do. I would advocate for a no COLA adjustment for teachers, and so I don't think there's a world in which the union would accept that. So that's not a situation. But even if you had that just moving down the steps, so 3.3% increase into your overall salaries.
I feel like if we get into the weeds too much, it becomes not philosophical, but it becomes a discussion about negotiations and why they are what they are versus I kind of like the example Katie gave, which takes the past and just says this gives you an example of what it looks like and how we get to the salary line that we have. And like people can disagree with it, but it's the reality of what it is. It's the reality of negotiations. I just worry if we get too much into a lot of examples, then it's like then you're in the weeds of the chart and could then especially noting that you're in the negotiation year, does it get into like a discussion around feedback around what it should look like versus this just explains for a lot of people if you don't know what a step is, you don't know what a lane is, this is how it goes.
Do we, just on that point, like, is our assumption that the warrant committee, that a critical mass of the warrant committee members may not know how the step and lane function works? Because I am kind of feeling what Amanda's feeling. Like, I'm wondering if this is a bit much, and it might be worth just saying, and Mark and Katie, correct me if I'm wrong, 99% of teacher contracts in Massachusetts are constructed this way. We're not doing anything different. And we are competing with districts that are adjacent to us that pay higher base salaries. So the structure of our compensation is both standard and meant to compete to attract high quality teachers.
Yeah. Okay.
I agree with that. I think my only hesitation, and I think in some aspects it's valuable to show this, is just that the point has been brought up multiple times. And we keep on explaining this. And I just think we have to be consistent in explaining it and providing the information because the question just continues to be asked.
Yeah, I think the feedback's heard, though. I think, Katie, your point of, and they're probably going to ask if we're using old data, and we can just say that we're doing this because this is hard contract. We have no hard contract for next year. That's negotiated, so we're not going to get into that. So this historical example. I do think even a second example, showing kind of the
lane change.
lane change.
Sure. Yes.
Just to, again, try and move through this quickly, but generally show that this is the effect of those things on the budget.
Mhm.
Um,
Could I suggest that we have the example of a lane change in the appendix? As opposed to going through. I just. If it's, you know,
yeah, I'm with you in that I don't want to spend too much time on it. I just think like, again, a step change itself is 8%. A lane change is going to be 11%. Like
Yeah,
that.
okay.
And so I think just saying like, we're talking about an average salary increase next year of 3.76%. Like certain salaries are going up more. And that's just how that works.
That's
so,
yeah.
And then trying to move through it quickly. But I do think we consistently kind of got pushback on the salary increasing by this amount kind of within our level service. That's like way too high. So just trying to show them some examples of like.
I guess I just also want to be conscious of this one person versus the whole committee.
Yeah, sure.
I want to take the appropriate time.
Yeah, I hear that. I do think maybe to your point, we could say, Nathan, I like some of the language you were using of just like high level. The salary structure within Milton is like all other kind of districts and, aim to be competitive in terms of rates. That's all handled with negotiations. I could try and add some additional language to that one, both kind of related to your points. And then we have cost drivers, non-salaries. So just trying to talk about the things based on that budget workbook that Katie shared that are right on the higher end of the percent increases. So transportation budget increasing by 8%. With foster care transportation, which is mandated. Special education services contracts. This is one also I just made a note of.
Mhm.
If somebody wants to, should include. Those are the ones I pulled out based on that kind of budget workbook. I don't know if there are other things, Katie, that you felt were things we should highlight, or if there are things in here you think we shouldn't highlight.
Do we need the bullets? Do we like? I don't know. I feel that. Feel like I don't have to need that one. The increase, like, I think it's contracted. It just feels funny calling those out. Just that one below it, the homeless.
I was mostly trying to ensure the percent increases similar to this of just like what are the percent increases again that are.
Yeah, but though I think the bullet about also, I think we've talked a lot about transportation. I think there's so many contributing factors. And we're talking about contractual requirements. So those are just two of many. So it just feels kind of funny calling out homeless foster care transportation. And then I guess my question would be, this would, not that it shouldn't be in there, but I think we should just be prepared for what does that mean? Spend contracted services increased 12.2%. Like what are those? And then I think recognizing or just pointing out that sped out of district tuition that's driven by the state. The state sets the rate for tuition. So that's not us, that's just
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Again, we obviously have more time.
Yeah.
And can provide again some feedback a one-on-one. So I know you gotta go. Was there any? I'm sorry, I wasn't paying attention to time. Were there any other? We can talk about this slide. Slide feedback.
No, it was the early on ones. I think it's to your point, like I don't want to lose them.
Yeah.
So I think as much as we can, I think it's really important to your point, start with the student. Like this is what we're doing all of this for, and here are the gains, here's the great work that's being done. And then as much as we could do it, tell the story, build the budget, but then if we're getting more, if there are more detailed things, having it in the appendix so that we're prepared to talk about it, but not necessarily go through it. But that was really.
Do you think, your thought that this kind of section as a whole should be moved to the appendix?
I think it will depend. The one slide above, what's the one right below, the one about that one? No, the one right below this section, the number 39. I think that this points to why the reserves were depleted and we need to go back. But I think if we get too much, I don't want to feel defensive because I don't think that we need to be defensive. I think this is, there's a rationale for the way the budget is set. If I think then, just me personally, you guys can disagree, that if there are questions and they're saying, well, we believe it should be here versus here or something to that effect, then this can come up. But I think I feel like if there's a balance between rationale and an explanation of why, but if we go too much into it, then it just feels defensive, and I just don't think we need to be, and there might be, we might have given them enough, and
Yeah, so your thought would be maybe moving 39, in that case, I think also 40, but these were from kind of John's slides, down to the appendix. You can reference them.
then if we need, and then just talking about I think that piece will be important.
Yeah, so here.
But less, I just think, just like not too many slides.
And here's our overall goal, this kind of our plan on it. This is why we're trying to get circuit breaker. I'm sorry.
It's okay. It's okay.
I'm
This
sorry,
to be
you're
an over.
No, I know. I'll go and clean up the appendix too.
We can weigh in individual.
Yeah. Okay, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
No problem. Thank you. Really appreciate it. All right. Nathan, any thoughts you have on the non-salaries cost driver slide?
No, I'm comfortable with this.
Nothing else. The proposed budget. This is the framing slide again from kind of John's slides. Just some they prioritized cuts, talking quickly kind of through and up.
Mark, on slide 33, I wonder, and I'm happy to give this some thought offline, so it's not all on you. I wonder if there's a way to frame this as, we are spending $70-something million to deliver amazing teaching and learning services to our students. And I think we should start, I think we should balance this with both a strength-based and a deficit-based perspective. The budget is meant to achieve many important goals. And I think we should we could talk about this and talk about that at the same time. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So is it not within this, not focusing on just the cut like this? To your point, I think this is deficit based in that it's focusing on the positions that we are cutting, how we are kind of working to meet the $1,049,000 revenue gap, but rather than framing this as a way to meet that gap, framing it as what are we doing with the how much it is, the $2 million plus dollar kind of additional contribution.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, maybe it's just starting with in my head, I think of, and I'm imagining, Katie, like various versions of those sort of top line budget tables you've built that show where costs are going. And, we haven't gotten to talking about goals for next year, but I assume that they will be an incremental continuation of what we've been working on this year. And so that allocation plus the 3.5% increase, or 3.7% increase are going to further our progress towards those goals. It's going to be maybe slower than what we would have done otherwise, or a little bit, it's like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, because um, we're not, we're not going to be spending the amount of money we anticipated to spend to get to those goals. So that's kind of like where I'm thinking of it. So it could be just helpful and sorry if this is somewhere else in the deck, but just to outline like how that budget will be allocated, and maybe remind people, I know you do earlier, but just remind people of the goals that we're trying to achieve with that budget.
Yeah, I like that.
And Mark, I couldn't tell from earlier in the conversation, did we want to get into a conversation with the warrant committee about this about what's on 35 and 34 and 35?
I assume they're going to want to know. They're going to ask like, what is the change in the stuff. I think
Okay.
Your point is a good one, I think, Nathan. And so I think we could, again, potentially just leave this in as kind of a general framing, add some other ones that they can talk about how we are allocating 3.76, kind of in a more positive framing rather than deficit framing. And we potentially can move these 3 things to the appendix to say if questions on what we are cutting, we can move these down and share them. But the discussion more than here is on, again, what are we trying to sustain and add to, or move forward next year with the 3.76% allocation.
Yeah.
Is that understanding you right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I guess, that's right. Maybe it's worth just, you've had more conversations with Jay on this than anyone else. So you know what they're looking for. If you feel like we should just directly speak to these, and, especially the slide on the green does speak to, the slide with the green table, does speak to some specific goals we're trying to achieve around building up our human capital practices, building up our teaching and learning practices, getting kids to school on time, and thereby strengthening culture, strengthening our financial position with the circuit breaker. So I think there is, I think it all works together, but it's just without the strengths-based view, you're sort of only getting one half of the story.
Yeah, no, I think that's really good. To be clear, I don't think we should go line by line, explain each of these cuts.
Yeah.
I don't think that is a good use of time. I think, though, we can share, like, here are some positions that will be lost or adjusted next year in order to help meet our budget allocation. So just really just talk, my thought was talk about that at a high level, but have that there, share with them. Similar, these are some other reallocations. I think one is right, but this maybe is a slide we talk about more, just given it's the places we are working to invest in and tying those investments back to kind of our priorities. So I think all those points are right. And then maybe again, from a deficit based perspective, we actually remove this slide and just say, again, here's the kind of total budget allocation of that. Some on. So that I think is good feedback for this section we can work on.
The only thought I had was, I don't know if it would be helpful because we're trying to talk about it in totality, showing like we have that grid that we had shared originally showing the cumulative increases for level service. I just don't know if it would be helpful to almost like show that and then show reallocations and like reductions and reallocations, and then it just gives that overall number of what the budget will be in that percentage increase.
Yeah, within that table. Yeah, as that table hasn't been.
I think it may potentially be in the appendix right now. I'm not sure. Let me double check.
Oh, yeah, this one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then just at the bottom, put budget reductions and then budget realignments and then show the new total.
Mhm.
I don't know if that would be helpful or not, but just a suggestion.
Yeah, I think having that, yeah, I think having all that within that updated table, if you can update that bottom section of the document. Sure.
Okay.
Great. And then again, we kind of talked a bit about the revolving accounts, but we're saying again how this just ties to our budget goal. So long-term strategy. Around why we're utilizing circuit breaker. I don't know if we actually want to change its title. It's not really revolving accounts overview. It's really specifically circuit breaker utilization.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's it. Brings us to about 40 slides, although we're gonna cut a number up at the top, a consolidated number at the top. So I think we'll be around kind of 30 to 35 slides, which is about a 40-minute presentation. So not short, but I think walks through. I know we have some warrant committee members on the call, so they're still on here. Hopefully, if they have thoughts on the agenda, things we're missing, certainly would appreciate their or things we get into that they think are kind of unnecessary. Appreciate your emails and your thoughts. So we're on. Anything else we think is missing from this?
I don't think so.
All right. Well, we'll continue to work on it, refine it, let you know when we made some updates to it. And then, yeah, I don't think, a little bit to John's question on what the Monday meeting will look like. I guess Amanda's not here. Nathan, I don't know your thoughts, but my thought is I don't think it makes sense to kind of walk through these slides with the full school committee. None of this is new information. Obviously, when we update it, I think I will definitely share this with the full school committee before we go in front of warrant committee, in case they have thoughts they want to share, concerns they want to share. We've done that previously, but we don't need to walk through the slides and have a working conversation with the full school committees.
Yeah, I think that sounds right. So Monday, the school committee is meeting to vote on the budget.
Yes.
And Tuesday, we're meeting with warrant committee.
Yes. 7 o'clock.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, then we're at a little bit beyond time, so apologize and appreciate your time, Nathan.
Yeah.
Next item of business is just discussion of next meetings. Next meeting, obviously, our next Wednesday is the 18th. That'll be after warrant committee, so we can debrief that bit. And then I don't think we have any other work on the budget unless something comes up at the warrant committee that is pretty big, but typically like they might have some follow-up questions that we need to answer, send them some replies back to, but don't necessarily need to have that be the focal point of the meeting on Wednesday. I think my hope would be maybe on Wednesday we can try and pivot back to the revolving accounts policy discussion. that kind of draft document we put together in the past. I don't know though, Katie, if you're gonna. I think the action step on that was you and John were gonna meet, look at that, make maybe some suggested updates to it for our conversation at the next school committee meeting. I don't know if y'all had the opportunity to do that already, and if not, I don't know if you're gonna have time between
Right.
now and next Wednesday to do that. So I guess the question to you is, do you think you will have time? And if not, should we really just cancel next Wednesday's meeting? Or not cancel, but not hold a meeting next Wednesday and instead schedule for the 25th where we can have a conversation on the policy.
Sure. I would have to check with John on his schedule. I know I had made some edits after our original conversation, but we didn't have an opportunity to meet and discuss them. So I think we would potentially need a little time to do some work. And I do think that a part of the conversation the conversation that happens at the meetings next week at night may kind of help some of the conversations that we have with our revolving fund discussions. So it might make sense just to maybe bump it to the 25th. But I can check with John and see what he would prefer.
Okay. In my mind, the things we have left as we're approaching the end of the budget cycle, just to kind of name this, is for this year is the revolving accounts policies, trying to kind of nail that down. We're obviously going to lose Amanda on the end of April. So I think it would be good to have her involved in some of those conversations. And then we'll need to have some discussion of presentation to town meeting of the budget. And, if we want to get together some slides, typically there's some questions that come up in some sense that, again, further discussion of school budget. So I think we'll need to have time to do that before that town meeting, beginning of May. And then I do think we should talk, I'm starting to kind of update the budget timeline for next year and hoping we can talk about that. Again, essentially just try and talk through the draft so we can share that really with budget coordination committee and the town administrator and things like that to try and get that better, like we are in a healthier place before things start back in September. Because I don't think a whole lot will happen over the summer with some of those groups.
Mm-hmm. If we are talking about financial policy and the revolving fund policy, and then it is going to become school committee policy, would that have to go to policy subcommittee as well?
Oh, no, it's a good question. I can ask Amanda, and I mean, it's a financial policy. True points. That's kind of in that little space between
Right.
it. So I think we can talk with Amanda and Lizzie and Anna if they want to review it. I mean, at that point, I don't necessarily think it needs to go through both committees because then at that point it's going in front of the entire committee.
Correct.
Right? So
Yeah.
my thought would be we just kind of draft something. I think we've told them we're working on this, and so it's not like it's unknown to them.
Yes.
Bring it to full school committee, and it's
As a recommendation, makes sense. I was just trying to think about
Yeah.
the timing too, because knowing that the frequency of their meetings is a little bit different than finance.
Okay. So what I might suggest is we retain the meeting next week, and maybe next week we at least just debrief a bit the warrant committee and then can start the conversation on what we think, how we might adjust the presentation for town meeting, just so we can move that forward. And then we can try and leave as much time as possible in the month of April for the last week in March and the month of April for trying to wrap up some of this policy, revolving accounts policy work. So we can accomplish that this year.
Great.
Does that make sense to you, Nathan?
It does. Yep.
Okay. Anything else we should on the agenda or? Oh. Okay, then I will make a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, Nathan,
Yes.
I'm a yes. Thank you, Nathan.
Thanks, Mark. Thank you, Katie.
No problem. Have a good day.